Hey everybody, Ryan here from the Breaking Bad show. First off, we got a little different format coming at you guys this week. You'll notice that Chad is not with us. He's taken this week off, spending some time on business development and his personal business. This week, we're excited to welcome to the show Daniel Torrez. Now, I had the opportunity to meet Daniel in a group called The Power of Our Story. Now, if you haven't heard of The Power of Our Story, you got to look him up. It's an amazing group. So Daniel's a 21-year military veteran. He currently works with the Federal Reserve Police. Now, like a lot of people in our profession, Daniel struggled throughout most of his career with burying his emotions. It's something we all do. We don't want to share. We're men. We hold it inside. We're strong. We don't want to share those type of things. Daniel suffered from all of the effects of burying so many things deep down inside of him for his career. It wasn't until he learned to deal with them and express his emotions that things began to change for him. Now, Daniel thrives with sharing his story, sharing the things that he dealt with, that he buried, and sharing how life-changing it is to share those stories and release those emotions and share those emotions versus keeping them buried inside of us. Daniel shares with us a process that he uses, which he's given the acronym AARR. If you want to find out what that is all about, you're going to have to stick around for the show. This is the Breaking Bad Show. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Breaking Bad Show. This week, as I mentioned, we're excited to welcome Daniel Torrez to the show. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And you're coming from down in the sunny state of Arizona, right?
That's right. It's good old sunny Phoenix.
That is beautiful. As I mentioned to you before we started recording, that's where all the people from up here in Boston like to head down to, between Florida and Arizona, depending on whether they like the humidity or not.
Yeah.
So Daniel, why don't you start off and share with our listeners a little bit about what it was like for you growing up, and ultimately what led you into choosing the military background that you started off in.
Yeah, absolutely. So born and raised right here in Phoenix, Arizona. Kind of grew up, let's say, middle class family, raised Roman Catholic, went to mass every Sunday and, did all the catechism learning and all that good stuff. And then just growing up, I'm the third of three boys, and then I have a younger sister. So, we got four children. My mom and dad, and just growing up, I used to watch all them old school TV shows, Emergency 51, Adam 12, One Adam 12, and Chips,
we were just having that conversation the other day, and the same TV shows came up, and I said, you know what, I grew up riding my Power Wheel, a little plastic Power Wheel around, pretending that I was Frank Poncherello, man. I absolutely loved Chips Patrol.
Yep. Old Ponch was, was kind of my hero back in the day. I had the same type of hair growing up. So, I saw myself as a Ponch. And just growing up, my dad was in the Army. I had an older brother in the Army, and relatives, uncles, in all the services. But yeah, just growing up, I was like, I wanted to be a firefighter or a cop. And, I was kind of a troubled youth growing up. And I had a positive encounter with a police officer when I was in high school. I was the driver of a beer run, went to the local 7-Eleven, and my buddies got out, decided to grab a couple 12 packs of some Budweiser without paying for it. Driving away, and there's a cop, got pulled over, got busted. But they white carded me, field interview carded me.
Yep.
And like a dummy, the 7-Eleven was about a half mile from my house. So he had me go home and explain everything to my parents, and I thought that was a great experience with a cop. And I said, you know what, that solidified it for me then. So I wanted to become a cop after that. And that was my senior year in high school. So I knew you had to be 21 to join the academy. And I said, well, what better way to get some experience than become a military police officer in the Army? Yep. So that's what I did. I joined the Army to be a military police officer. And my plan was to do 3 years. That was my original enlistment, get out, come back home, and go to the academy to be a Phoenix cop. So when I was 16, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and he passed away a couple of years later when I was 18. And he passed away about 3 weeks before I was set to go to basic training to Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Oh man.
And a few days before he passed, I had a long chat with him because I could have got out of my enlistment, on a compassionate basis. My recruiter said, hey, your dad's home. My brother actually came home on compassionate reassignment from Germany and was actually working at the MEP station when I left. But I had a chat with my dad, one-on-one, and he told me, you need to go ahead and join the Army, go off to the Army. We knew it was getting his time. Mm. He said everyone else will be fine, the family will be fine, your brothers and sisters will help take care of your mom. So he said, he just told me then and there, Torrez never quits. So I kept my enlistment. A few days later, he passes away. And I didn't cry when he died, and didn't cry at his funeral. And then, a little over 3 weeks later, I'm at Fort McClellan, and I never really grieved my dad's death. And then I get to Fort McClellan and, learning to be a soldier, suck it up and drive on, pain is only weakness leaving the body. And then I get into MP training, and it's, we're doing some training on domestic violence calls. And there were some pretty graphic videos and photographs. And a couple of the soldiers ran out of the room, and one of them puked outside the door, and another one just couldn't handle it and started crying. And I just remember the drill sergeant saying, those guys aren't going to make it. If you're going to be a good military police, you can't let things get to you. You got to have thick skin. You can't show emotion. And I was like, hey, man, I'm pretty good at that right now because I've been compartmentalizing my emotions about my dad. And so, yeah, that kind of set my trajectory. I just wanted to be the best military police I could be, serve my country, go back home and become a Phoenix cop, so I got into it, graduated, went to my first duty station, Fort Hood, Texas, young military police officer thinking I'm going to save the world, got my 45 on my hip and my old school U.S. cavalry holster, which is what we had back in the day, and I'm 19, got a badge and a gun, and I'm just trying to save the world and be a good cop, in the military. And, certain, what we call critical incidents happened. And, I just continued that compartmentalizing of those emotions. And I think it really affected my response to critical incidents throughout my career in the Army, and I was just, I was angry, I was just angry at life, the fact that my dad died. And, I was doing those high risk activities that you shouldn't be doing, drinking, smoking, fighting, just angry. And I said, well, man, I got to figure this out, because I wanted to be a good cop in the Army, and because that was going to help me when I got out, again, thinking I'd come back home and be a Phoenix cop. And I was just, I thought I was going on down the wrong road. And this was 1985, 86. A lot of my, MP leadership were Vietnam veterans, and they weren't having it. It's like, you better, grab your bootstraps and figure it out. So after a few months, I had a pretty, what I guess I would call my first critical incident that kind of affected me. I responded to a medical emergency in the housing area. And when I get to the house, I got there before the fire department. So I go inside and it's a young mother, screaming, help my baby, help my baby. And I see this young child on the couch, and it just by the looks and there's a particular smell. I kind of figured that the young child was already deceased. But I went into helping, and so I removed the child from the couch, put her on the carpet, started performing CPR. As soon as I started performing CPR, the young mother, went from, help my baby to thank you. So I kept doing CPR, and I didn't realize it at the time. But when my father passed away, he passed away at home in his bed. And that morning I went in and he was there, and it was just a smell, because it was cancer. And it's just, cancer to me has a very death-like smell, because it's something that's eating away at your body. It was a very similar smell with that young child that I was performing CPR on. So the firefighters come, they look at me like, what are you doing? Because they pretty much could tell that this young child was deceased. When I just kind of glanced over towards the mother, she was crying, but she was still saying, thank you, thank you. So the firefighters took over. They did all life-saving, measures, and got her on the gurney, took her out. I got my information from the young mother and went about our day. I go back to the MP station, turn in my report. And again, this was 1986. There was no SISM debrief or, any type of, hey, how you doing? It was like, good job, troop. Get back out on the road. I was like, okay, cool. So again, I was just like, man, that was a pretty rough little incident there. So I finally asked my team leader, I'm like, hey, man, I'm having some issues. I got to figure this out. I'm still processing my dad's death. I'm, drinking, smoking, just doing high risk behaviors, and I'm angry all the time. He's like, all right, well, who do you want to go talk to? I said, well, I was raised Roman Catholic. I said, so I think I'll go see the chaplain, because who else to guide a young wayward soul than a chaplain? Yeah. So I go to the chaplain, he's kind of busy in the office, and I pour out my heart to him, let him know what's going on, and he gives me this pamphlet and says, well, read this, and if you got any more questions, come see me again. I said, all right, cool. Somebody that I trusted or thought would, give me some guidance, help me, gives me a pamphlet and says, read this. So I leave his office, I throw the pamphlet away, and I just go back to, to being a knucklehead. I was a good MP. I thought I was, because during this time I got selected and I got to go to SRT training, which is the equivalent of SWAT training in civilian police. So I'm a young PFC, and I'm learning all this high-speed stuff, being trained by former Delta operators and other individuals at a civilian school for SWAT. And I'm doing stuff. I went from being a M60 gunner on a good old M151A Jeep to being a platoon leader's driver. So I'm progressing in my MP life and duties, but personally, I was torn up inside, and I didn't know how to fix it. So a few months go by after I go see the chaplain. Again, I'm doing great as an MP. I'm handling business. I said, man, I told my team leader, I said, hey, I need to go talk to the chaplain again. I said, well, maybe this time, because it's the second time, he'll give me some good guidance. So I go back. He doesn't remember me. I pour out my heart again, and he reaches back. At least this time, it's a book, an actual book, and it's a book like on, how to grieve the loss of a loved one. And he tells me, well, read this book, young trooper, and if you still got some issues or questions, come see me again. I said, all right, yeah, cool. So I leave his office. I throw the book away, and I just, that set my trajectory on not dealing with the things that I experienced, as a MP or, as a soldier for decades to come. So I go through, just being, continually angry, personally, but again, professionally, I think I was doing good stuff as an MP. And I leave Fort Hood, go to Germany, and I just continue grow in my career as a young military police officer. And then it gets time for me to, my time's going to come up. But of course, the good old reenlistment NCO catches me. And I'm in Germany at this point, and I'm assigned to the, back then, the U.S. Army Europe, the Honor Guard MP company. And he's like, well, do you want to reenlist? I was like, nah, man, I appreciate it, but I'm going to go home and be a Phoenix police officer. He's like, well, what if we offer you this or this? And I was like, okay, well, that sounds pretty cool. So I reenlisted, left Germany, and ended up at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the airborne. I was promised I would be able to get airborne school. But you know how recruiters can be. So I get to Fort
I've
Bragg
heard more than once.
Yeah, I get to Fort Bragg, and again, I'm just, I'm all in. It's back then it was, be all you can be, and that's what I was doing. And at the time, I felt I was trying to make my dad proud. I wanted my dad to be proud, and I just kept doing stuff that anytime the school came up, I was volunteering to go, no matter what it was. And so, I'm a young corporal, at Fort Bragg. It's kind of the one of the main posts in the Army back in the day. And the opportunity to go to Ranger School came up. Like I said, I'm a young corporal. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm good at MP stuff, and I prefer the field MP stuff over the patrolling the streets and traffic stops. So I kind of caught that bug of being the tactical MP versus the law enforcement MP. So I raised my hand. At first they were going to send like the leadership, company commanders, platoon leaders, and platoon sergeants to Ranger School. Out of an MP brigade, there weren't that many. So they finally said, hey, anybody that wants to go to Ranger School. So raised my hand, went through some preparation, and they sent 4 of us to Ranger School from my MP battalion, and 3 of us made it, came back with our Ranger tab. In the late 80s, it wasn't very common to be a straight MP and also have a Ranger tab. And as we start to get ready to deploy and things like that, I get in leadership positions. So my ability to suppress or to compartmentalize my emotions about stuff that I experienced became better. I became an expert at doing that, because as I progressed in rank and as I progressed in skills and ability, it wasn't about me. It was about making sure I was taking care of my troops. And
so during this time, what was your personal life like? Did you have anything going on in your personal life, or were you just immersing yourself in the military profession?
That's a great question. So when I joined the Army, I had a girlfriend. It was my high school sweetheart, and we were going to save the world together. We were going to get married and this and that. So when I was leaving between Germany and Fort Hood, we ended up getting married. So I took 2 weeks leave. We got married here in Phoenix, and we left to go to Germany together. And, what better way to figure out if you're going to make it or break it if you're taking your high school sweetheart overseas to something brand new, and things were good. We were both young, in the Army, traveling, and got to Fort Bragg, and she was involved in the family support group, and helping the other spouses and stuff, because again, as I went up in rank, her responsibilities kind of grew as well. Yeah. And so I had that, but at the time when I caught that bug that it was be all you can be, it was God, country, and then my family, or at the time, my wife.
Did she know that you were did she know what you were going through personally inside?
I would say yes. I did not really share a whole lot. She was there for me when my dad did pass away, because we were together at the time. And, so she knows that I never really cried or did anything like that. So she knew that. And then, once we got to Fort Bragg after Germany, it was, she knew I was, especially after I graduated Ranger School, because I just became Ranger Torrez. I didn't have a rank, and I was a young corporal, and I came back and I was, I thought I was the cock of the walk, and it didn't matter what your rank was. If you didn't have a Ranger tab in my MP battalion or brigade, yeah, you're just bumping your gums, So I would get in trouble for my mouth quite a bit after I came back as a young corporal wearing the Ranger tab, but it didn't matter, because no, I used to just say, well, nobody can bring any heat on me. I'm Ranger Torrez. So I kept that mentality because that was part of my suppressing my emotions and making sure that I was doing the right thing, take care of my soldiers. And at the time, my wife at the time, was not even secondary, she was tertiary. So we deploy a couple of times, we went to the US Virgin Islands, our first deployment, or my first deployment from Fort Bragg was after Hurricane Hugo hit in 1989 and destroyed the Virgin Islands, specifically St. Croix. So, we're wheels up, and, 18 hours later, we're landing and we're handling business, taking care of, the National Guard Armory. We're helping the U.S. Marshals track down escaped prisoners from the federal prison there, and we're training the Virgin Island National Guard and riot control. So we're doing all this stuff. And then that was it, we came back from that deployment. A few months later, Operation Just Cause hit Panama. We deployed to that, so we're cutting our teeth, we're going to combat. And that was it, that was my sole purpose, was to, to again, be all I can be. And, so that just went from there. Couple of reassignments here and there. And, I'm just doing what I'm trained to do, and I'm training others in what they should be trained to do. And we just kept going. And again, I preferred the tactical side of the military police, being out in the field, going to combat, going to deployments. Every now and again, doing other types of missions. And then I go back to Germany. I go to Berlin, part of Berlin Brigade. Same thing. Deployed, got to go to Kenya, flying in and out of Somalia, and this was all before the Black Hawk Down stuff hit. But I was going into Somalia, flying in with Air Force combat controllers and a Navy corpsman or a SF medic to protect the satellite equipment that the combat controllers would guide the aircraft in to drop off the relief supplies. Some things happen. I couldn't complain about that deployment. We were living in a 4-star hotel. I had my own room. We do water aerobics for PT, even though we were working 12-hour shifts, unless I was flying in with the other people for the relief flight stuff. But one day we're leaving, we're working 12 hours overnight. So in the morning we get on the bus, we're leaving the airfield where we do airfield security, and we're going back to the hotel. We come across a traffic accident scene. So, we're there. I tell the bus driver to pull over, start directing my troops, start doing traffic control, rendering first aid to an individual in the roadway. And, we put our gloves on, he was a little bloody. And as we're doing that, the crowd starts saying, yeah, the car that hit this guy in the road is down the embankment in the water. And they're like, somebody's got to get the guy out of the car. He's still in the car. So everybody's looking at the good old American soldiers, and I'm looking around like there's got to be somebody here to go in that water. And of course, nobody did. So we're there as the ambassadors of America. So I jump in the water, and I couldn't even see the car because it was probably 15 feet deep, and it's real murky water. It's in Mombasa, Kenya. So I dive in, I find the car, and I can feel the individual, in the driver's seat, but I couldn't get him out. He was stuck for some reason. So I come back up, I go back down, I tried it again and come back up. And the third time I I went to the right passenger side, so I grabbed him, pulled him over the front seat, out the right rear door. My troops come down, we get him up on the embankment and then up on the sidewalk. And this individual had been in the water too long, and I knew that the individual was deceased. So just doing that, I'm getting ready to perform CPR because, again, big crowd, American soldiers. I said, we're gonna make sure that these people know that we're here to help. So I start performing CPR on this individual. That takes me back to the young girl that I performed CPR on, knowing she was deceased, which takes me back to my dad. And so we do that, we clean up. Their little form of an ambulance comes, a little Toyota, truck. They throw the injured individual in the bed of the truck, and then they throw the deceased guy in there right next to him, and they head out.
Oh man.
So we clean up, we get on the bus, and I just tell the bus driver, take us back to the hotel. I said, we got to do PT. So I had one of my team leaders or whatever start doing PT. I said, man, that water was nasty. I should probably go, wash my ass. So I'm taking a shower. I'm like, yeah, that was nasty. And, this was 92. And a lot of people say that the AIDS epidemic began in Mombasa, Kenya, because all over the streets and stuff, and the billboards, it's all about AIDS and how to protect yourself from it. Mm-hmm. So I said, man, I'm going to skip PT. So I'm going to go to sleep. I've been up for 12 hours. We did this craziness. I'm, jumping in the water and whatnot. So I'm sleeping. And next thing I know, they're pounding on my door, and it's my platoon leader and some other people from the airfield, my bus driver. And he's like, hey, you got to go back to the airfield. I'm like, what? So the bus driver goes back to the airfield and tells them what happened. And they're like, well, we got to get this guy back. So I have to see the Navy doctor. He's like, yeah, we need to take you to the hospital. So they took me to the little Kenyan hospital, and they pretty much flushed every orifice I have. I had to leave a bunch of samples. And, then the Navy doctor is telling me, he's like, yeah, he goes, you should probably get an AIDS test every 6 months for the next 10 years. Oh, because of our location and because of where we're at and because of the water and what I did. I had cuts on my hand from going into the car. Even though I had, medical gloves on or surgical gloves on, they were cut, and I was bleeding. I was touching blood from other people and other bodily fluids from the people I was, performing life-saving measures on. So I said, well, that kind of sucks. So I'm on this deployment. I do that, and then I get, a chance to talk to my mom on a satellite phone, and because it was a Red Cross message. So my mom calls me. I'm on this deployment. That stuff happens, and she's like, "Mijo, your tata Fred passed away, my mom's dad." And I'm like, okay, thanks for letting me know, but tomorrow I'm flying into Somalia to help make sure these relief flights take place. So it's just another episode of me not processing death or grieving, and I just kept going. I just kept going. I said, well, it was always, because nobody ever asked Ranger Torrez, hey, Ranger Torrez, are you okay? How are you doing? Because I would think it was just expected. Yeah. Well, Ranger Torrez is good because he's Ranger Torrez. And I would always check on my troops and make sure that they were good. And to me, that was enough to make sure I was good. But obviously that was the wrong thing. So I finally get out. I got out of the Army in 2000 because at the time, I now had a child with the high school sweetheart. We had tried for a while in Berlin. We couldn't conceive. So then I leave Berlin and I go to Fort Myer, Virginia with the Old Guard. So in 1994, that's when the Old Guard was integrating women into the ranks. And the Army thought it would be best to bring in military police because we've had women in the military police corps for quite some time. So that was quite an adventure. We're bringing female soldiers into the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment. So that was met with a little bit of resistance. But again, here's this MP, but is also wearing, a Ranger tab. And at the time I got to Fort Myer, I had also went to Air Assault School and Airborne School. So I finally got Airborne School, but I did it all backwards. I went to Ranger School first, air assault school and then airborne school. So that was quite the adventure, going to Ranger school with no wings. A little bit of, got harassed a little bit more, let's just say. So I, was at Fort Myer and we're doing that. And we finally had our first child. So, going back to what I had said before, my wife, when it was just the two of us, she was tertiary. So when we had our daughter, I let her know that it was now God, country, our daughter, and then you. So she was number 4 in the big scheme of things. And this was 1995 when my daughter was born. And I didn't cry for those 10 years between when my dad died. Well, because I stopped crying then in 85. But I was in the delivery room when our daughter was born. And it just got to me. I was like, well, now I'm a dad. Of course, makes me think of my dad. Because before having my first kid, my dad passed away when he was 50 years old. So I always thought, because I was a knucklehead, I said, well, as long as I can make it to 50, I'm good. Because it's 50 was good enough for my dad, it's good enough for me. And then 1995, 10 years after my dad died, I had my first kid. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work anymore. I need to make sure I'm here for a long time.
Yeah.
So we go through some stuff, and I ended up going to Korea and things like that. And I ended up getting out at 15 years so I could come home and save my marriage. Well, that didn't work. So we get divorced. And I think I'm doing the right thing and letting the biological mother be the custodial parent. And she gets stupid. She finds a boyfriend. Boyfriend molests my daughter. And she knew about it and didn't do anything about it. So I get a phone call one day, and at this point, I'm out of the Army. I'm remarried. I'm actually with the Federal Reserve as a Federal Reserve police officer, and so I'm remarried and I have another child with my current wife. And so we get this phone call from my then sister-in-law from the first marriage. And she says, so-and-so and so-and-so got arrested for this, and your daughter is at a shelter. And I said, what? So we go pick up my daughter at that time, and she was 8 years old at the time, 7. And, I got sole custody. And then when I find out everything that took place, I ended up, so the biological mother gets arrested. She's charged with child abuse and some other things. And the perpetrator obviously charged with child molestation and some other things. But I find out that she knew about it, tried to cover it up. The police were called. So it was a whole situation. And so I ended up suing. I sued the police department that was involved because they came out more than once, and it was, nothing to see here. I sued the hospital that was involved, and I sued the doctor that was involved. So it was a civil lawsuit. And here I am, I'm a career military police officer, and now I'm a federal law enforcement officer, and my daughter was being molested, for a little bit of time, and I didn't know nothing about it. So that hits you in the gut as a dad. What the hell happened? And I was like, well, you would never think that the biological mother of a child would allow something like that to happen to their child. But then, so we sued, we won. My daughter is set for life. Not that takes away anything, but I made a plea deal, or I took a plea deal for the biological mother because I didn't want my daughter to have to testify. And I agreed to the plea deal with the perpetrator because I didn't want her to have to testify. So the biological mother gets 2 years in county jail for child abuse, child neglect. We couldn't get her labeled a sex offender because she did not do anything, even though she had knowledge and didn't prevent it. But the perpetrator got 41 years total, and that's with a plea deal. So I was, pleased with that. And my daughter got all the help she needed, counseling, everything that she needed. She's thriving now. She got her own graphic design business in Florida, and life is good. And she has never seen her biological mother since the day I picked her up from the shelter, and that was 2004. So it's been some time, and she doesn't want to. Yeah. She sees my lovely wife now as her mom because, she raised her from when she was a little kid till she left us to go to college. But I'm being deposed by I think it was the hospital system's lawyers. And, their basic theme was, well, this couldn't have happened because you're a cop. You should know the signs of child abuse, child neglect, sexual abuse. So they actually asked me those questions, but I was prepared by my lawyers. But it took all that I had to not reach across the table and chokeslam the lawyer who was asking me these questions, because he's like, how could this happen? How could you not see the signs? And aren't you trained? So I answered, I said, you know what, sir, you're absolutely right. I've been in law enforcement for many years. I said, but I've never been an investigator or a detective. I said, I was just a straight line MP. And I said, yeah, we got about, I think, a 2 or 3 hour block of instruction on child abuse, child neglect. I said, so I would not consider myself an expert in that field. And I said, and my primary function and experience as a military police has been, on the tactical side. So I answered, and that pretty much shut down that line of questioning. And like I said, we ended up settling, for the betterment of my daughter. Like I said, she's set, so just trying to figure things out and continue. So I get out of the Army the first time. I'm working security, corporate security, private security. And then, I decided to join the reserves. And that was a challenge because while I was on active duty, still suppressing those emotions and conducting high risk behaviors, I got 2 DUIs on active duty as a military police officer. So that's not a real good look when you're trying to come back in. And, my recruiter was like, yeah, we could do it. It might just take some extra steps. So he put the time in, because I told him, I said, look, I got out as a staff sergeant. I was in military police. If I'm going to join the reserves, I want to be a staff sergeant and I want to be military police. So it took us a little navigating, the system. But yeah, I joined the reserves in 2007 and I came back in as a staff sergeant MP. That they were trying to say I was going to have to take the ASVAB test again. I was like, bro, I can't do that. The first time I took it, I was in high school and I had knowledge about math and stuff like that. So they accepted
during this
all my
time, when you're going back and you're applying to go back into the reserves, up until this time, had you done anything yet to kind of release and work on all of that stuff you've been,
No.
as you described, compartmentalizing inside?
No, absolutely not. And part of it was I always just had this belief that I need to make sure that I'm taking care of others, because I feel I've been in the service of others since I joined the Army, in some form or fashion. I've been protecting people or training people. And no, I didn't. And especially after the situation with my daughter, it was like, I got to be there for her. I got to make sure she's good to go, and her little sister and this stuff, and my lovely wife. So no, I had not. It took a lot more for me to get to the point where I am today, where I can share my story. So we did all that. I get out, join the reserves, and my buddy from Fort Bragg is like, man, join this unit. You don't have to deploy, and this is 2007. So all the wars are still going. He's like, you can volunteer to go on a deployment, to go training people, in the States. I'm like, all right, that sounds cool. So I joined the reserves, this unit that is not supposed to deploy. And then, 8 months later, I'm activated on orders to go to Fort Bliss, Texas, which is cool. And, it's about 6 hours away from Phoenix. so I get mobilized on active duty orders and I go to Fort Bliss, and we're training all the units going overseas to Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, the Horn of Africa, and basically anywhere they're going to do military police missions, we were training them. So excuse me, I was a non-lethal weapons instructor. We ran the OC lane, the combatives lane. We did all that. We were training them to go help, their Iraq or Afghanistan partners to do the policing missions. So we're doing that. And, so I'm in the reserves, but I get to a point where I found out about a program where because I have so much active duty time, I can apply to the Army to get an active duty retirement. So I said, well, that sounds cool. I should do that. So I do that. I spent 4 years at Fort Bliss training units to go overseas. I got an opportunity to go to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, when the Army was taking over detainee operations from the Navy. We were tasked with revamping the detainee operations training because of Abu Ghraib, little situation that took place in Abu Ghraib with detainee operations. So I spent some time in Guantanamo, and we're going through getting our little tours and going across the complex, so we can revamp the training. And at one point, I'm in a room, separated by some tables, but I'm looking across at the detainee, and it was KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was, bin Laden's number 2, and they say the financier of, the 9/11 attack. So it's like, wow, that doesn't happen every day. And again, you just do things, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, I got to compartmentalize that. So all these things are happening. And I get into this program called the Sanctuary Program, where I can get an active duty retirement. And I'm like, well, I've been at Fort Bliss for 4 years. I only got like 18 months left. For sure, the Army's going to keep me here at Fort Bliss. No, that's not what happened. So when you get into that program, it's, the needs of the Army. And at that point, the Army felt they needed to send me to Fort Irwin, California, in the middle of the Mojave Desert, to be a trainer at the National Training Center. So I'm on active duty now as a military police trainer. I got promoted, so I'm sergeant first class now, and again, I felt I was pretty good at my job as a military police and as a soldier, because I always believed it was, we're in the profession of arms, therefore I'm a professional. So I get to my unit at Fort Irwin, and I'm assigned to the Sidewinder team, which is engineers, military police, military intelligence, chemical, all the support type units. And the sergeant major is it kind of looks familiar. So we're looking at each other, and he's like, do I know you? I said, I'm not sure, Sergeant Major, and he's like, well, so we figured it out. We were at Fort Bragg at the same time back in the day. He used to live in the engineer barracks on Smoke Bomb Hill, which was some of the roughest times for us MPs to go and respond to, fights at the barracks or fights at the clubs. But, so, we get serious, and he's like, I'll be honest with you. I've had a lot of people come from the reserve and the National Guard who get in sanctuary, and basically they're already what we call road. They're retired on active duty. And he's like, is that you? And I was a little offended because, again, I'm Ranger Torrez, I'm handling business. And I told him, I said, Sergeant Major, I said, no, that's not me. I said, it's my job to train soldiers, to fight and win. I said, that's what I'm going to do until my last day when I retire. So from that point on, we had a good relationship. And at the time, the MP team had a senior NCO, but the EOD team, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, the EOD team didn't. So he says, you know what? The EOD team needs a senior NCO to take charge. And I said, Sergeant Major, I said, I don't know nothing about EOD. I said, I'm an MP. I said, I'm pretty good on the other tactical stuff, because of my training and experience. He's like, well, you can teach them leadership skills. You show them what it's like to be a good NCO, senior NCO. So I became the EOD NCOIC, working with the EOD captain. And we were handling business. We ended up combining the MP training lanes and the EOD training lanes, and I felt, again, I was doing good stuff, and I was doing what I was trained to do. But then that retirement mark hit. So I retired out of Fort Irwin in 2013 and ended up staying in Northern California. And I became the director of public safety at a small university, a private university. Did that for a while until we had to move due to some situations with one of our kids needed to be closer to a military hospital. So we moved, and I ended up being working for a K-12 school district in Northern California. I was out of the district office in charge of safety and security. And again, I'm all in wherever I'm at. Mm-hmm. I immerse myself in what I need to do and to make things better and to protect people, make sure people are safe. And when it was time for our youngest to graduate high school out of California, my lovely wife and I said, it's time to go back home to Phoenix. And that's what we did. So I quit my great paying job with that school district. We bought a house here. When I came out by myself, so I could get the house ready. And then that's when I got the job with the Department of Corrections. But my first job was in victim services as a victim advocate. And then I became what they call the VOD, or the Victim Offender Dialogue Program coordinator. So I helped build this program where we bring survivors of violent crime all the way up to homicide, so like a surviving family member, and we bring them face to face with the inmate or the offender, so they could do that restorative justice. So I helped build that program. I conducted several dialogues, and the majority of my dialogues were with either, child molesters or people that have committed other violent crimes. And people that know my story, they're like, man, how could you do that? How can you, sit across the table from a child molester, knowing my situation? And it's like, I had to tell them, it's first of all, because it's not about me. It's about helping that survivor and as well as helping an inmate. And I said, I just see them as a human being. Granted, they've done some horrible things, but I don't see them in an orange jumpsuit, and I don't see them as an inmate or as a child molester. I see them as another human being, and we're both trying to help the survivor. It's all about the survivor, So I did some of those dialogues, and they take 10, 11, 12 months of preparation, because you don't want somebody jumping across the table trying to choke slam an inmate. So we do a lot of preparation. So I thought that was a great program. We were doing some good stuff, but it was a grant funded position, and the 3-year grant cycle was ending, so they were going to renew it. And so we were preparing for the grant, and and I'm doing good stuff. I'm driving all across the state of Arizona. I'm talking to inmates, talking to survivors, and I think I'm doing some good stuff. I'm helping people heal. And then I come to find out end of July, early August of 2018, 2020, that the people in charge of applying for the grant made the decision to not include my position. Oh. They were going to include the program, but not my position. And they failed to tell me, because the grant had to be turned in or submitted in April of 2020. And what hit March of 2020, pandemic. So we get a new administrator at the end of July, and I'm going in to give her a briefing that, hey, I got these people on, ready to do these dialogues, and I'm excited. I'm helping people heal, and a little bit helping myself heal, through stuff I've been, because I'm still not addressing anything, that I've experienced all the way back to my dad's death. So she's like, well, I got some news for you. And I said, okay, cool. And I could tell on the look on her face, because I can read people. I said, what's going on? She's like, oh, your position is going away. I said, that's odd. I said, because that decision had to be made in April. I said, it was either late July or early August. I said, why am I just finding out now? So basically what that meant was the grant cycle ends September 30th. So come October 1st, I was out of a job. And they're just letting me know in late July, early August, when the decision was made in April. So she's like, I don't know why. She goes, but as soon as they told me that your position was not being, continued, I asked them, have you told Daniel? And they said no. So she's like, so I gave her kudos for being a good leader, because she came right to me and said, hey, guess what? You're out of a job, October 1st. So I it was a gut punch, because it was a people thing, because we're in victim services. So our sole purpose is to help others, and the people in charge that made that decision, what got me was like, what do they really think of me as a person if they can do that to me? Basically, it's kind of kicked me to the curb. So it was a gut punch. It kind of threw me in a way. So I said, you know what? I said, can I take the rest of the day off? She goes, you know what? Take the rest of today. It was a Thursday. She goes, take the rest of today off and tomorrow, and we'll talk on Monday. So over the weekend, I actually had to call my wife, my lovely wife, to come pick me up. And she's like, what's going on? I said, I'll explain to you when you get here. So I told her, and she just got pissed, because she knew the people I worked with. She knew who made that decision. And I said, it's good. We're good. But over the weekend, I just it hit me. So I sent a scathing email to the director's complaint line or whatever. And we had recently got a new director. He's a former Marine. He came out of the Bureau of Prisons, so he was with the federal prisons, and I was pulling no punches, and I let him have it. I'm talking about you as a director, a former Marine. Is this the kind of leadership you would want in your Marine unit? Is this the kind of leadership you would want with the Bureau of Prisons? So yeah, I unloaded because I was angry. Mm-hmm. So come Monday, I get a call from the deputy director saying, hey, how you doing? I said, I'm doing good. I said, but kind of a shitty situation I've been put in. But luckily, this deputy director was a big fan of victim services and a big fan of the VOD program. And he's like, well, this is what I want you to do. So a couple of weeks go by, I get my stride and I say, F it, screw this agency. And I started applying to other jobs. I got some interviews. Some of them were victim services. I was going to interview for a police department for a victim service supervisor job. And I said, you know what? I don't think I want to get back into victim services, because if this is how the people are going to be treated, then I don't want to do it. So I blanketed everybody. And, I was starting to get some decent interviews with some, large corporations, safety and security jobs, because that's my background. That's what I know. And it was getting close to, it was the end of September. And luckily, again, my lovely wife was like, look, she had to sit me down one day, because that was my downward spiral. And everything started to come up. My dad, all the crap I've seen, in the military, on deployments, combat, whatever. And it was throwing me for a loop. And luckily, my lovely wife was able to be the person that I needed to support me. But she finally had to sit down and say, look, we're good. If you're not working October 1st, we're good. Because she was working full time. She was working part time, trying to get her own private practice. She's a mental health provider. So, she says she's never therapized me, but I'm not sure because she's that good. And that's my saving grace is my lovely wife. So I hit that point, and then I saw this job with the agency, but it was in a separate division. It was in a separate building. And I said, when I interviewed, I told the people I interviewed with, I said, because they're like, you could, we don't want you to be here for 2-3 years and then, go find something bigger and better. And I told them, I said, look, I'm a military retiree. I said, the money's great. I said, but that's not the sole purpose of me getting this job. I said, I want to retire out of the Army and I want to work for somebody, and I don't want to be jumping from job to job, So I said, you know what, I'm loyal to a fault. So I applied for the job that I currently have, which is the volunteer coordinator. And the deputy director that was very helpful said, look, talk to the chief human resource officer. Let us know how we can help you. And, a couple of weeks after that, the chief human resource officer called me and says, hey, I got to ask you this question. He's like, do you hold any ill regard toward the agency? And I told him, I answered right away. I said, no, I don't. I said, but the people involved in the decisions that were made, I said, yeah, I hope I never see them again. I said, because that was an effed up situation that they put me in. And so I haven't talked to them people because I had to stay in that office until September 30th. We're doing pandemic stuff. So luckily I was able to work from home. So I didn't have to do a whole lot of inter-office with the people that were involved. But yeah, so I got this new job. My boss is a retired Air Force guy. So we kind of clicked, and we're doing good stuff now. I work with the senior chaplains at all of our prisons to try to bring in volunteers to help the inmates. So and it's still people ask, how can you first of all work in corrections, but how can you want to help inmates? And I'm like, because again, they're human beings, and I credit that to my dad. He was a very honorable man, and I don't ever remember him disrespecting anybody that we came across. And he was very humble and just a walk softly and carry a big stick type of guy. And so everything comes full circle. So I'm working with the inmates that may be child molesters, but I'm good to go. But that downward spiral that my lovely wife helped me get out of, and then finding different groups like your podcast or the Power of Our Story connection, and then leads me to other people, and I start sharing my story. And I actually started telling my story here in Arizona at a law enforcement behavioral health conference.
Oh, great.
And after I did it the first time, I had a young firefighter come up and ask me some questions, and one of the questions he asked, because he was fairly young, was like, back in the day when you went to that, or when you were doing those high risk behaviors and you were angry, he's like, what's one thing that you think would have helped you change your trajectory? I said, you know what? I said, if that chaplain would have showed a little bit more care, concern, and just said, grab my hand, let's pray, whatever he could have done other than give me a book or a pamphlet. I said, if he would have just listened, and non-judgmentally listened to my story and offered some help, I said, I think that would have changed the trajectory. So, I think sharing my story, hopefully it helps others, because we're not alone. We all have our own stories and our own situations, a lot of similarities. And I always tell people, I was never the tip of the spear in the Army, but I was always a part of the spear. And I've had my share of, being out there and handling business. But I think, changing my trajectory here when I was getting that downward spiral because of the way I felt I was disrespected and treated, really helped me become vulnerable, to share my story, and all the ugliness in it. And there's a lot of ugliness. But one thing I learned when I went through the Master Resiliency training through the Army was, we got to hunt the good stuff. And it's a shame that we have to say we got to hunt the good stuff, because we're just, we're wired to focus on the negative. So I hunt the good stuff. I'm very thankful for all my experiences and all the people involved, primarily my lovely wife who stayed by me through thick and thin. And, and she was a military police officer as well. We met in the Army. So she's from Connecticut, up there that way.
So what do you think was one of the most useful strategies or tactics that you learned to be able to help you, decompartmentalize everything that you had tucked inside you and be able to move on?
Yeah, I think it's the ability to allow myself to be vulnerable and to lose that persona, of Ranger Torrez, because I became Ranger Torrez as a young corporal in 1989. And it was always that, I don't know if it was a badge of honor or, I don't know what it was, but it was that persona. And I had to let go of, I am not Ranger Torrez. I'm Daniel Torrez, who happened to be a Ranger and a soldier and an MP. So I think allowing myself to lose that persona of my job is what I am or who I am, and being vulnerable enough to share my story and not try and hide the emotions, especially crying. Now I watch a commercial where a dad and a son are ordering French fries at McDonald's, and I'm bawling on the couch for no reason, and that's okay. But I think allowing myself to be vulnerable and to understand that I am not Ranger Torrez. Ranger Torrez is a part of Daniel, of who I am, but that doesn't dictate my life, because I believe that showing your vulnerability is actually showing strength, and for me, that strength is anchoring my resilience, and I think a big part of it is just being resilient. The ability to bounce forward. So I think that's really helped.
And I think it's so important when people like you come out and share your stories like you're doing, because it's so important that whether it's young military, young people in the military, young police officers, young firefighters, people in these service professions that are going to see and have to deal and learn to process these horrific things, we're taught, and it's the culture to suppress it and don't show and just bury it in. Now, I understand that we can't be breaking down in the middle of a scene or something like that, but we definitely need that culture shift where people learn, and we learn that, all right, afterwards, there's a time, and this is how you process it. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. All of these feelings are okay. And when people can share that, sharing those things and talking about it is going to help you process it and help you move on a lot faster. Hopefully we can learn, and we can show all these young people that if you let it out, there's no need to carry it for years and years and years and let that weigh you down in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, so when I hit that downward spiral, and I was like, I'm like, I've been in worse situations, because if all else fails, I go get a job as a security officer making $15 an hour. I'm still contributing to the family. I'm still making money. I said, but I've been in worse situations. So I had to grab my bootstraps and say, you know what, let's do this. So what I did is I had to rely on my training. What have I done? And we know the AAR, the after action review. I said, you talk about things that went well, things that went bad, and how can you sustain the good and improve on the bad. So I turned AAR into my AARR method. So 2 A's, 2 R's. And if you want to sound like Steve the Pirate, you do the AAR. If you get that reference. So instead of after action review, what I developed for myself and how to process things, life, it's, accept, acknowledge, respond appropriately versus reacting negatively, because I believe that's what I was doing when I was angry, drinking, smoking, high risk behaviors. That was just reacting negatively to the traumas I experienced. And then the second R is reaching out. When necessary, because it's not if it's necessary, it is when. So the first thing I AAR'd was my dad's death. I had to acknowledge, yes, my dad passed away, cancer got him when I was 18. I had to acknowledge the profound effect that my dad had on me, even in those short 18 years. And then I had to respond appropriately. And I felt that responding appropriately was sharing my story, which in fact is sharing his story. And then the second R, I had to reach out, and reaching out was reaching out to the Power of Our Story tribe, reaching out to different people, and ultimately just this year, actually reaching out to a mental health professional to process stuff that I've not processed since 1985. And my goal with that is to get support to help me process life, but to help me process some of the crap that I've seen, some of the crap that I've been through, some of the crap that I caused, because I'm no angel. And it's going well. Seeing a licensed clinical social worker who has a background helping military and first responders, so she gets it. And things are good. It was a rough day yesterday, because yesterday is actually the anniversary of my dad's death, July 12th. So the time from Father's Day to July 12th is a little bit can be a little bit difficult for me.
Yeah.
But I think I'm doing well. I definitely will tell people that, we have to understand that we are reacting normally to an abnormal situation. That critical incident, that traffic accident, that, the child drowning, whatever it is that you experience. And like you said, we have to understand that once everything's done and the dust settles, it's okay to say, hey, brother, you doing all right? You want to talk about it? Or let's talk about it. Instead of just going home or, going to the barracks and locking yourself in or self-medicating, whatever it is, those high-risk behaviors. So I think, yeah, you got to let down that, you got to drop that defense mechanism, and drop that persona, or that, this is what I am, is who I am. So I think, sharing your story is going to help someone, because I decided to share my story at a, trauma and law enforcement training, where I heard some sheriff talk about his story from New York. He's out of New York, and he responded to his boss's suicide.
Oh.
And, so it's, I actually went up to him and talked to him, and I said, I told him then, I said, I said, I think I'm going to figure out how to share my story. And from that point on, I created my little PowerPoint webinar or whatever, in-person conference presentation or webinar. And I've been doing that. And I really appreciate podcasts like this, because, every little show or every presentation reaches certain people.
Yep. Absolutely right. That's one thing Chad and I always say. If we can reach one person with our show, and one of our guests mentions something that helps someone change their life, then we've done our job. That's all we can hope for.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I sent the emails after you guys let us know is I read Chad's article. I have 4 therapists. He made a post. He made a post about, the people he goes to see, because we all have our own experiences, like I said. And I actually posted on LinkedIn, yesterday, because again, the anniversary of my dad's death. I was like, yeah, I've missed him every day for 37 years. And it's only been within the last 1 year that I've actually processed or attempted to process his death. And I think it's had a profound effect on me personally, emotionally, but I also think it's had a physical effect, because people talk about the adverse childhood experience score, or the ACE score, where if you've had trauma in your childhood, later in life, you're going to have some medical issues. Yep. Well, my ACE score is a big fat 0, but I got some medical issues. I got some issues. I got high blood pressure. I got, something was going on with my heart for a while. And I truly believe that for those decades where I just suppressed or compartmentalized everything, my body was saying, hey, you can't do this. We're going to shut down.
Yeah, it's amazing what the stress will do to your body.
Yeah, absolutely. The body keeps score. It's a book. I don't remember the Vander Kolk or something like that, but the body keeps score, and, I'm not the technical science guy. I just like to share my story, but I do research, I read, and yeah, it definitely affects your health, your body, and
Daniel, if we have listeners and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
My LinkedIn profile, right there on LinkedIn, Daniel Torrez, you'll see me. It's Torrez with a Z. Because I I don't have social media. I don't have Facebook or Twitter or none of that stuff. I still got a Hotmail email account.
And the other thing I'll do, I'm gonna drop the in the show notes for this. I'll put the link for the Power of Our Story too, because that is a powerful group for so many people. I know a lot of people personally that group has made a huge difference in their lives, and what Sarah does is absolutely amazing for the people that join that community. So definitely drop that
absolutely.
out. So if this resonates with anyone and you want to reach out to either Daniel or Sarah, absolutely do so. And I can promise you, you won't forget it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Daniel, I know we talk about a lot of deep things on our show. So I like to end the show on a little high note. We don't want to leave people feeling, we want to leave people feeling good. So I'm going to start. I always love asking people, what is your number one book recommendation that you would recommend someone read?
Well, it's the Hero Code.
Hero, okay.
The Hero Code by Admiral Mccraven, former SEAL. And the reason I like it, he talks about this code, the Hero Code, but it's not, the hero like the Navy SEALs or Delta Force or cops or anything else. Everyday people can be heroes, but he has a code, and it kind of runs along the lines of the leadership principles from the Army.
Yeah.
Humble and stuff like that. And I'm actually using his bookmark that comes in the book to read my current read, which I think will resonate with a lot of people on this podcast, Relentless Courage.
Ooh, that sounds great.
By Michael Sugru and Shauna Springer.
Okay. Yep. I know exactly the book you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's my current read. I haven't finished, but yeah, I'm getting into it. But the Hero Code by Admiral Mccraven.
So is he the same one that did the Make Your Bed speech?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So I read his book, Make Your Bed, and I listen to that speech all the time.
Yeah, this is
definitely going to check out the book.
Yeah, this is his follow-up book.
Awesome.
And it just talks about everyday heroes and how we can live this hero code that he calls, and it's just about being humble and, forgiveness and things like that. And, I really like it.
Awesome. And just one more. I know Chad usually does his 5 questions, and I'm not going to be able to live up to that, but I'm going to have one fun question just to wrap things up here. So you're at home. It's a Saturday night. It's you and your wife. You're hanging out. The kids are out of the house and everything. What are you guys doing to relax and have fun?
It's funny because, like I said, we're empty nesters, and it affected us differently. So we would be sitting down trying to figure out which movie we're going to watch from Netflix. She's a big horror movie fan. I like the horror movies, but of course I'll watch anything.
Yeah.
I like more of the action, military action movies. And if we're not trying to figure out which movie we're going to watch, then we're trying to figure out which series we're going to pick up and start doing the Netflix marathon watching session.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Maybe have some adult beverages and some popcorn and just hang out with each other on the couch and watch a good movie or watch a good TV show.
Just hanging out nice and relaxing. Perfect. Well, Daniel, once again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on the show and share your story and share some encouragement, letting everyone know that if you're struggling, if you're dealing with things, you don't have to stuff them inside. You don't have to keep them inside and carry that weight around for your life. There's people like Daniel, there's people like Sarah at The Power of Our Story. There's people all over the place that you can reach out to. And even it might not be Daniel, might not be Sarah, but they can help you find someone that you can start making those changes and stop carrying around all that baggage you're carrying on, start living the life that you want to live. So, absolutely. Daniel, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone that has tuned in and listened today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you very much for listening to today's episode, and I definitely hope you found value. Feel free to go check out our website, breakingbadshow.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn and Instagram at The Breaking Bad Show, and you can email us if you want to connect at breakingbadge1@gmail.com. You can learn more about Chad and connect with Chad on LinkedIn, and you can check out his business, Intercounty Investigations and Solutions, at intercountyis.com. You can connect with Ryan on all the social media major platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. If you like this episode, we ask that you like it, leave a comment, leave a review, and we hope you share it with a friend who will also find value. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you all next time.